Yeah, so my story of getting into the career space is pretty non-linear, I think. I've always been a helper, and I grew up with a mom who was an HR executive, which at the time I didn't know would ever play into my adult life or my career any more than just having her sort of harp on me as a teenager and tell me the different things that I should be doing to be effective in my job search. But I never really wanted to be a resume writer or a career coach or anything like that. I actually started out as a music education major. I wanted to be a high school band director. And I went through several years in school for that and kind of got towards the end and realized I was struggling a little bit with the musical sort of aspects and the higher level musical stuff. I was also realizing around the same time that while education and the public school, educating kids was something that I was really interested in. Dealing with the logistics of the public school system was not quite as desirable as I wanted it to be. So I actually dropped out of college in 2008 and started my career, which, if anyone remembers, was not exactly the best time in the job market at all, but that is what I had. So I started my career and kind of went through several different career transitions because I had no idea what I wanted to do outside of being a high school band director. So that was my time to sort of figure that out. And what I realized was, even though these different jobs that I kept getting didn't work out for the long term, I kind of realized that a lot of times I wasn't even maybe fully qualified for these jobs, but I always did really well in the application and interview process. So that was something that I was starting to figure out was a process that I was pretty good at. And then I eventually found College Career Services, which combined my education background with my love for helping people and sort of my homegrown HR knowledge. And that's where I really found something that made me feel good, something where I could help people, I could help educate people, and really kind of just feel good about what I was doing. So I did that for several years. Unfortunately, the school that I was at when I left all of that got bought out and the whole campus got shut down. And that was the point where my partner said, hey, instead of revamping your resume and trying to go get a new job, what if you branched out and went out on your own and helped other people with their resumes? And I had already kind of started doing that as a side hustle. So that's how I got into it. And from there, I just worked really hard. I got a mentor and I started following a bunch of really smart experts in the field. I got some certifications and training. And that's how I've been a resume writer and career coach for the last 6 or so years now. Job search advice for 2021 for me comes down to a few things. The first thing I would say is to diversify your job search strategy. So I know that that's not a unique or new thing just for 2021, but at this point, if you're not doing that, you're really missing out. So if you're only applying online, that's not typically going to be the best use of your time. So I would say, outside of just applying online, spend some time building relationships, seeking mentorships or informational interviews, getting involved more on a personal level in your job search. I also would say, and this is kind of a part of that, another thing, another piece of advice that I would give for job seekers in 2021 is to cultivate your social media feeds. This is something that I've been trying to shout from the rooftops for a while now. It's sort of a passive way to really get ahead in your job search. So especially on LinkedIn, you can follow and engage with people who can help you and give you advice, not just on your job search, but also in your career. You can follow companies that you're interested in and learn about what they put out to the public. And that could be a way for you to figure out your unique value proposition and get into that company. And even beyond just the networking aspect of cultivating your feed and choosing very carefully who you follow, who you interact with, and things like that, you can also cultivate your other social media feeds, LinkedIn, sure, also Facebook or Instagram. And you can do it for more than just your professional development, more than just your job search. You can do it for things like personal development as well. If you're interested in learning more about how you can be more mindful, or if you're interested in learning more about helping others, supporting others, maybe getting involved in a community organization, these things are all over social media. And if you're just passive about your engagement and you don't make conscious decisions about who you're following, who you're connected with, who you're engaging with, then you're really missing out on an opportunity to continually develop yourself in a personal way and also in a professional way and with your job search. So that's number two, I'd say is cultivate really your social media feeds to make sure that you're choosing people and organizations that align with what it is you're interested in and the person that you want to continue growing into. And then the last thing I would say, just as far as general advice for job seekers for 2021, is to be bold. Put yourself out there. And I know that that has to do with these other two things I've been talking about, but just in general, go out there and go above and beyond. So don't just be a lurker on social media. Get active, engage, talk to people, put your own thoughts and ideas out there. Don't just do the bare minimum. Do your research so that you can really go above and beyond to make sure whatever pieces of your job search strategy you are using, that you're really maxing them out, that you're achieving optimum success through these things by really knowing your target for your job search and your career through and through, and making sure that every piece of what you're doing, every action you take, every document you put out there is really in line with those things and is more than just the bare minimum of what other candidates are doing. So be bold, go out there, put yourself out there, and really go above and beyond. Job search trends for 2021, I think, are partially just sort of building on the trends that have been coming over the last few years. And I think there are probably a couple of things that may be really new and starting to blossom in 2021. So a couple of things that I feel like have been building for a while. Number one is networking, which I definitely just touched on. Networking has always been a thing. It's always been sort of recommended. There are all kinds of stats out there that say that networking is the best way to find your new job, that people who come in, say, as a referral candidate, as opposed to just an anonymous submission, the people who are referred in are often easier to trust. They are often preferred by recruiters and hiring managers. And really the only way to get those referrals is to network. And I think that with this new focus on everything being remote and digital networking, it's really becoming easier than ever to do that. And so I think more people, more job seekers who maybe had not been doing the networking, maybe hadn't been brave enough or just hadn't decided to really get into networking previously, now that it's digital, now that it's more of a focus than ever, now that it's easier than ever, a lot of those people are getting into it. So if you're still a job seeker who's dragging your heels and not doing that networking, then you're really getting further and further and further behind in 2021 and moving forward. Another thing that I feel like has been starting to build and is really sort of coming to fruition in 2021 is your professional brand as a job seeker. So this idea has started to be pushed around for the last, I don't know how many years. And you can put your professional brand out there in a lot more ways than job seekers are aware of. So it used to be that it was pretty much just your resume. Your resume should show your brand. And if you had that down, then you are doing more than most people. At this point, I would say that beyond your resume, your brand should be present in your social media. So certainly your LinkedIn profile should be a place where your brand is really well represented and cohesive with the brand that's in your resume. And you can do that in your actual profile, in your headline, in your banner, in your featured section, and also just in your general content. But even beyond the profile content, your activity on LinkedIn can show your brand as well. So engaging with others in a way that's sort of consistently aligned with the brand that you're putting out there. Posts, even posting about your career or your thoughts or the ideas you have to move that industry or job type forward can be a really great way to illustrate your brand, as well as writing articles on LinkedIn. That's something that a lot of job seekers don't use, and it can feel very outside the box. But if you're following that suggestion of, hey, be bold, go above and beyond, then writing articles is an excellent way to get your thoughts and ideas out there, show more about who you are. So if you're in the middle of a job search or hiring process and someone goes to your profile, they see more than just your profile. They see your activity, your posts, your articles. So your brand in those areas can be a really big piece too. And then beyond that, there are new digital ways that you can show your brand. So creating an online portfolio or a website for yourself to show your achievements or some of the skills that you have, anything like that can be a great way to show your brand. Having answers to interview questions that are sort of aligned with your brand and show the skills you're trying to emphasize in your brand, that can be really helpful. And even since a lot of interviews are digital and you have Zoom and you can do your own digital Zoom background, you can even create a background for yourself that's, visually pretty minimal, but that has some information or some keywords or a nice, strong sort of headline for yourself that demonstrates what your brand is. So networking and your professional brand are two trends that I see that we're building on and are becoming even more important. There's a couple of things I think that are newer that are coming in with 2021, and it has to do with there being a lot more of a human element in the hiring process. I feel like the stuffy sort of quote unquote professionalism that you have to have in the job search is becoming less stuffy, and it's becoming much more of a focus on recognizing who the candidate is. And I'll say that even as I'm talking about this stuff, I don't think this is hugely prevalent in the market right now in the hiring process, but I think it's starting. I think there are some companies that are really realizing, hey, if we pay more attention to who the candidate is, if we pay more attention to what true intrinsic value they bring, our company can be more successful and can have more benefit from having those kinds of people in our company. And with that comes the idea that job seekers, and again, this is only just barely starting to happen, I think, but I hear a lot of experts out there that are proponents of this. I certainly am. And it's the idea that there's more power on the side of the job seeker. So this really comes from the idea that number one, job seekers are starting to say, hey, I'm more than just a job seeker. I'm a whole human. And one of the ways that this is really showing is in interviews. So job seekers are starting to ask questions like, so how did you support your staff during COVID? Or how did you support your BIPOC employees during the protests last summer? Or even how many women and or Black, Indigenous, people of color are represented on your board? And what happens when job seekers take that power and they say, hey, I want to work for a company who aligns with the personal things that are important to me, and they bring that into their interview and they ask those questions, and especially if they make the choice maybe not to accept an offer based on the answers from those questions, recruiters, hiring managers, they bring that information back to whoever's above them. And that starts to become something that companies recognize, and they start to go, well, if I'm losing out on talent based on the fact that we're not doing the right things with our company that talented job seekers want to see, that's when the changes start to happen. So I think it's important to note that we're starting to come into a time, hopefully, I'm very hopeful and I support this idea wholeheartedly. We're starting to come into a time where job seekers and employees have more power and are able to kind of hold employers' feet to the fire and say, hey, if you're not doing this, you're not going to get my talent. I'm going to take it to your competitor. So those are big things that I think are trends kind of coming into job search and hiring in 2021. I would say the number one thing that I sort of think about as I'm considering what content to put out there is dispelling bad information. When I started working in college career services and kind of, dipping my toes in the water of this sort of career space, I realized how much outdated and bad information was still out there. So number one for me is always to dispel bad information that's just not good for job seekers, and really try and get better information into their hands. The second thing I think about that goes into my thought process really kind of goes hand in hand with that, and it's being educational. I have an education background. I went to school for music education. I always have felt like, a teacher at heart. And if I can educate job seekers, the same way I do with my clients when I work one-on-one, if I can get that information out there and really educate, that's super helpful, because it's one thing to tell someone this is what you should be doing, but if you tell them the why, it opens up this whole concept in their brain, and then later they can make their own decisions based on having an understanding of that content. So I think that's really important, that the educational piece. And then the third thing I would say that goes into my thought process when creating content for LinkedIn is providing support or hope or help in some way. I think that social media can often be a very negative place. I think it's very easy to be negative on social media. And I try to keep my LinkedIn presence, especially, very positive. I have always, like I said, thought of myself as a helper. I've always gotten deep satisfaction from being able to help people and having people benefit from the help that I can provide to them. And I feel like when the world is difficult, which, technically is kind of always, but when it's especially difficult and when lots of people are struggling, I think that many, many, many people can just benefit from some positivity, some support, a little bit of help and hope. So that's the third thing that I try to keep in mind as I'm creating content for LinkedIn. Say that the content my audience most resonates with, is probably those actionable strategies. So things that they can that are tangible to them, that they can actually do in their job search or their career. So yes, I like to educate and provide conceptual ideas and things so that people can kind of make their own decisions. But I also like to provide that actionable content, actionable strategies that they can walk away from my post and implement and do and see some sort of a change or a benefit. Or even if maybe they make that change and it's not the right change from them, they know that they're doing something, and then they can go, okay, well, that didn't work. What else can I do? So those actionable strategies is definitely one of the things that resonates the most, with my audience. I would also say the educational content. So that behind the scenes knowledge, and insights about the job search, that is stuff that job seekers just really grab hold of. So I do weekly lives on LinkedIn now, and I have sort of a different format for each one for the month, and then I start the next month over again. And one of the formats that I do, one of the sessions that I do is, I call it Roast My Resume. But it basically is taking actual real job seeker resumes, putting them on the screen and providing feedback. And people are so interested in that because most job seekers never get to see somebody else's real resume. They can go out to Google and see example resumes. They can look at example resumes on a resume writer website like mine. But those are sort of the upper echelon of resumes. They don't ever get to see real job seekers, and especially see that feedback of this is good and this is maybe not so good. So that behind the scenes knowledge and insight really, really helps people and helps job seekers. And then I would say it's the positive stuff, the hopeful stuff, the helpful stuff, the motivational stuff. Like I said, the stuff that helps you know you're not alone. So I think that's what resonates most.